The illusion Arsenal cannot afford to keep selling. This was not a victory. This was a confession wrapped in 3 points. Arsenal left Merseyside with the result they needed, but they also left behind something far more valuable than a clean sheet or a commanding performance. They left behind the pretense that this team possesses the ruthlessness required to sustain a title challenge. What unfolded at the Hill Dickinson Stadium was not tactical mastery or clinical execution. It was the exposure of a fundamental flaw that no amount of league positioning can disguise. Arsenal are becoming experts at winning matches they do not dominate, and that expertise is not a strength. It is a warning. The pathway to this result tells you everything you need to know about where Arsenal currently exists as a football club. A penalty awarded through video review. A handball so blatant it required no interpretation. A defensive error so cartoonish it felt almost scripted. These are not the foundations upon which championships are built. These are the circumstances through which mediocrity masquerades as excellence. Arsenal did not impose themselves on this match. They did not break down a stubborn opponent through superior movement, incisive passing, or relentless pressure. They waited. They hoped. And when fortune finally arrived in the form of an opponent's mistake, they accepted it without hesitation and retreated into preservation mode. This has become a pattern, and patterns reveal character. 1 week prior, Arsenal required 2 own goals to escape with 3 points against the team sitting at the bottom of the table. Before that, they needed a last-gasp intervention to avoid dropping points in matches where their superiority should have been overwhelming. Now, against an Everton side missing key players and operating with a depleted squad, Arsenal once again relied on circumstance rather than craft. The scoreline suggests efficiency. The performance suggests something far more concerning. It suggests a team that has forgotten how to impose its will. What makes this particularly troubling is the context surrounding this fixture. Everton arrived at this match without several of their most important players. Midfield options were absent. Creative outlets were missing. The attacking structure was compromised before kickoff. This should have been an opportunity for Arsenal to demonstrate the kind of ruthless superiority that defines title-winning sides. Instead, they spent the majority of the match struggling to create clear opportunities against a backline that was organized but far from impenetrable. The possession statistics will reflect Arsenal's control. The shot count will suggest dominance. But anyone watching with honest eyes saw something different. They saw a team uncertain of how to unlock a defense that was willing to sit deep and deny space. The penalty itself serves as a perfect metaphor for Arsenal's current predicament. It was legitimate. It was deserved. But it was also entirely reliant on an opponent's error rather than Arsenal's ingenuity. The handball was so obvious that it required no debate, no subjective interpretation, no VAR controversy. It was a mistake, plain and simple. And Arsenal's only route to breaking the deadlock came not through intelligent movement or creative combination play, but through an opponent's lapse in judgment. This is not dominance. This is dependency. What should concern Arsenal's management and supporters alike is the psychological pattern this creates. When a team begins to rely on external factors for success, it develops a passive mentality. It begins to believe that results will eventually arrive if they simply maintain possession and wait for opponents to make mistakes. This approach works until it doesn't. It succeeds until the day when the opponent refuses to gift opportunities, when the referee does not award the penalty, when the video review does not go in their favor. And on that day, Arsenal will have no alternative plan because they have spent months avoiding the difficult work of learning how to break down organized defenses through superior football. The evidence of this avoidance was visible throughout the 90 minutes. Arsenal's attacking movement lacked variation. Their passing sequences followed predictable patterns. Their attempts to penetrate Everton's defensive block relied heavily on individual brilliance from wide areas rather than collective intelligence through central zones. This is not a system designed to overwhelm opponents. This is a system designed to frustrate them into errors. And while frustration can occasionally produce results, it is not a sustainable strategy for teams with championship ambitions. Consider the implications of this approach over the course of an entire season. Arsenal will face numerous matches against opponents who employ similar defensive strategies. Teams that prioritize organization over ambition. Teams that accept limited possession in exchange for structural solidity. Teams that understand Arsenal's weaknesses and are willing to exploit them through patience. If Arsenal's primary method of breaking down such opponents is to wait for mistakes, they will inevitably encounter matches where those mistakes do not materialize. And in those matches, the difference between first place and second place will be determined not by who made fewer errors, but by who demonstrated greater attacking sophistication. The concerning reality is that Arsenal possess the personnel to play more incisive, more creative football. Their squad contains players capable of unlocking defenses through intelligent movement and precise passing. They have the technical quality required to operate in tight spaces. They have the tactical understanding necessary to recognize when different approaches are needed. What they lack is the systematic commitment to implementing those approaches when the conventional methods prove insufficient. And this lack is not a personnel issue. It is a philosophical one. When a team becomes comfortable winning unconvincingly, it stops pursuing convincing victories. It settles into a rhythm of acceptable mediocrity where 3 points justify any performance, regardless of the underlying quality. This mentality infects training sessions, team meetings, and pre-match preparations. It creates an environment where the standard for success gradually lowers until the mere accumulation of points becomes the only measure of progress. And once that standard has been established, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to raise it again. The tactical setup against Everton reflected this lowered ambition. Arsenal approached the match with a structure designed to contain rather than conquer. Their defensive positioning suggested anxiety rather than confidence. Their midfield shape prioritized stability over creativity. Their attacking movements lacked the kind of coordinated chaos that overwhelms organized defenses. This was not a team preparing to impose its will on an inferior opponent. This was a team preparing to survive a potentially difficult afternoon and escape with the minimum required result. And they succeeded in that limited objective. They survived. They escaped. They collected 3 points. But they did not grow. They did not evolve. They did not demonstrate any capacity for the kind of dominant performance that championship contenders must produce consistently. Instead, they reinforced the dangerous notion that acceptable results can be achieved through acceptable performances, that winning matters more than the manner of winning, that 3 points today justify the compromises that will cost them the title in May. The long-term consequences of this approach are predictable. Arsenal will continue to accumulate points through a combination of fortune, opponent errors, and narrow victories. They will remain competitive in the table. They will maintain their position among the title contenders. But when the season reaches its decisive phase, when margins become impossibly thin and every match carries championship implications, they will discover that the habits they have developed cannot sustain them. They will face opponents who refuse to make mistakes, who match their organization with superior attacking quality, who understand that Arsenal's current iteration lacks the ruthlessness required to capitalize on marginal advantages. This is the illusion that the match against Everton destroyed. The illusion that results alone indicate progress. The illusion that winning unconvincingly is somehow better than losing while attempting to play more ambitious football. The illusion that fortune will continue to favor Arsenal simply because they have positioned themselves near the top of the table. All of these illusions were exposed in 90 minutes against a depleted Everton side that should have been overwhelmed but instead competed on relatively equal terms until a single defensive error determined the outcome. What makes this exposure particularly damaging is the timing. Arsenal are approaching the most demanding period of the season with a performance profile that suggests vulnerability rather than strength. They have demonstrated an inability to control matches against determined opponents. They have shown a reliance on external factors rather than internal quality. They have revealed a tactical conservatism that prioritizes risk avoidance over reward pursuit. These characteristics do not disappear simply because the calendar changes. They persist until they are deliberately addressed through honest self-assessment and uncomfortable tactical evolution. The question Arsenal must now confront is whether they possess the institutional courage to acknowledge these limitations, whether they can recognize that their current approach, while temporarily effective, contains the seeds of eventual failure, whether they can accept that winning matches through penalties and opponent errors is not a sustainable path to championship success. This requires a level of honesty that many clubs find impossible to access when they are positioned near the top of the table. It demands an admission that current results might be masking underlying weaknesses that will eventually become determinative. If Arsenal continue on their present trajectory, they will likely maintain their position among the title contenders for several more months. They will collect enough points to remain mathematically viable. They will produce occasional performances that suggest championship quality, but they will not win the league. They will finish second or third, close enough to believe they were genuine contenders, but distant enough to recognize they were never truly capable of sustaining the challenge. And when that moment arrives, the pattern will have been visible for anyone willing to look honestly at matches like this one against Everton. The alternative is uncomfortable but necessary. Arsenal must acknowledge that their current approach is insufficient. They must commit to more ambitious attacking strategies, even when those strategies carry greater risk. They must prioritize the development of systematic solutions to organize defenses rather than hoping those defenses will self-destruct. This evolution requires courage because it might produce short-term setbacks. It might result in dropped points during the transition period. It might create moments of vulnerability that threaten their current position in the table. But without this evolution, Arsenal's limitations will remain unchanged. They will continue to struggle against opponents willing to defend deep and deny space. They will continue to rely on external factors for breakthrough moments. They will continue to win matches unconvincingly and convince themselves that unconvincing victories are sufficient. And when the season concludes with Arsenal finishing somewhere between second and fourth place, they will point to individual matches where fortune did not favor them, moments where decisions went against them, circumstances beyond their control that prevented championship success. They will not acknowledge the deeper truth, that they had months to recognize the pattern developing before their eyes, that they had numerous opportunities to address the underlying issues producing these unconvincing performances, that they chose preservation over evolution, comfort over growth, acceptable mediocrity over the pursuit of genuine excellence. And that choice, more than any referee decision or opponent error, will have determined their fate. The match against Everton was a gift, not because it produced 3 points, but because it provided clear evidence of what Arsenal have become and what they risk remaining. A team capable of accumulating results through circumstance rather than superiority. A team that has mastered the art of winning without convincing anyone, including themselves, that they possess championship quality. A team that exists in the uncomfortable space between genuine contention and self-deception, unsure whether to acknowledge their limitations or continue pretending those limitations do not exist. The tragedy is not that Arsenal lost this match. The tragedy is that they won it while revealing exactly why they will not win the league.